Hi, everyone. Welcome to the virtual day of the NC Live Annual Conference. We're so excited to have you joining us online today, and you are in the lightning talk session that's beginning at 1 o'clock. And since I see we're right on time and we've got lots of great content to get through, let's go ahead and get started. So my name is Sophie. I'm the Community Engagement Librarian at NC Live. And as the moderator for the session, I just wanted to share a couple of things before we get started. At NC Live events, we value the presence and active participation of all attendees. By joining us, you agree to uphold the principles of our code of conduct, which can be found on our website. And I'll go ahead and put a link to that in the chat if anyone's interested. We have 4 lightning talk presentations this afternoon. So in the interest of time, we're going to save Q&A for the very end. If you have any questions for any of the presenters, you can put those in the Q&A box, which can be found in your Zoom toolbar at the bottom of the screen. And I'll be monitoring that Q&A and the chat in case anyone needs assistance. But please make sure you stay muted during the presentation. The presenter slides will also be posted after the conference if you would like to access them later. Now, I'm pleased to introduce our first presenter, Morgan Pruitt. Morgan is the Outreach and Assessment Librarian at Central Carolina Community College. She loves birds, particularly the tufted titmouse and summer tanager. I'll hand it over to Morgan to present It Ain't Easy Being Green, Ideas for Environmental Wellness Programming in Community College Libraries.
Hi, everyone. I'm Morgan. It Ain't Easy Being Green, Ideas for Environmental Wellness Programming in Community College Libraries is really something that I'm passionate about, but also something that I'm still learning about. And so I don't have all the answers, but it is something that is exciting for me. So I first wanted to define what environmental wellness actually is in the kind of context that I'm thinking about. So here are some definitions. I found a ton of definitions, but notice that it's, valuing the relationship between ourselves, the spaces we live and work in, and the planet. Environmental wellness is defined as occupying pleasant, stimulating environments, and then environmental wellness is contributing to and engaging with spaces that are safe, accessible, and sustainable. These are not wrong. I'm not saying that they're bad. They're great. But I'm not really thinking about it from this perspective, first and foremost, because I can't promise to any particular student that the environment will be pleasant for you and also pleasant for me, because what we define as pleasant is so different. In the same way that like a safe, accessible space might be totally different for one person than what it means for another person. So I thought when we talk about environmental wellness, the thing I'm really defining it as is that you believe that you have the ability to contribute positive to your environment, so the self-efficacy, to be able to shape your world, and then learning about and caring for and acting responsibly towards the environment. The most important part is that we're focusing on the local environment, your region. So if you're in the triad, then you're focusing in the triad. If you're in the mountains, you're focusing in the mountains. If you're on the coast, you're focusing on the coast. And then that is predominantly about the green space. So it is literally the environment, not necessarily like your office space. So in that kind of framework, it matters because it can empower patrons, connect community resources with one another, and then have tangible, sometimes immediate results. And what I really found was that a lot of people were feeling some despair about the environment. And so the goal was to give them some resources that they could be successful in contributing positively to the environment, whether that was picking up trash along their walk to one building, from one building to the next, or that they can go out and identify birds. They can find the tufted titmouse or the summer tanager, and they know what they're looking at. So it gives this opportunity of feeling like you actually have specific knowledge about your environment and the way that it should or could look. So what we've done is we've worked with Wake Audubon to present a field guide to local birds. We did Good Vibes and Sunshine, where we kind of walked around the campus and got to know the campus a little bit more just by being with others and being outside. All the buzz about bee hotels, we talked about bee hotels. And then we did a nature journaling walk with Bio 112 and really helped them to see the campus and the environment. So really we tried to concentrate on this is what it looks like to be on your campus out in the environment. And then we have a nature and conservation LibGuide that covers a lot of the stuff that we are currently doing and the other stuff that we'd like to do. And some of the stuff we'd like to do is a pollinator garden, a seed exchange or library, which I know a lot of public libraries have, but is not something that we really have here at CCCC yet. And then nest boxes, working with Wake Audubon, and then talking about hypothetically, it would be really great to talk about the ways that nest boxes have supported bluebird populations and can also support other type of bird populations, more nature journaling clubs, and then more workshops on sustainability. So the idea is really to just get students thinking about their environment in a way that is very specific. Like I can go out right now and identify 4 different types of plants on campus. I want students to be able to do the same thing, so that there feels like an investment in that. How to get started is really easy. Think local. So you can think global if you want, but really like what allows you in your environment to take care of your community? What allows you to connect with people with things that they see every single day? Partner with your agricultural extension. We worked with the Lee County Cultural Extension, Agricultural Extension for the bee hotels, and then Wake Audubon for the birds. But there might be other organizations near you that could fulfill similar purposes. And then focus on empowerment rather than despair. People can't do anything about despair. There's just nothing that they can do. But if they feel like they're able to contribute and be positive about the changes that they're making, then it feels like there's somewhere to go, which is, I think, what a lot of students really need when they're thinking about the environment. That's it. That's all I got.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Morgan. That was really cool. Also great bird selection throughout your presentation. I'm also a big Merlin fan, which I saw there as a shout out in the chat. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Next, I'm going to give our presenters a second to pull up their slides, but our next presentation will be Cultivating Resilience in College Students with a Library Wellbeing Collection with Sydney Adams and Ashley Mills. Perfect, and they are very speedy, so I'll go ahead and introduce them. So Sydney Adams is the Outreach and Engagement Librarian at Davidson College. Sydney strives to strengthen partnerships with campus and community partners through shared programming initiatives to enhance students' academic experience and foster a sense of belonging at the library. Ashley Mills is the Special Projects and Assessment Librarian at Davidson College. Ashley works closely with library teams and the campus community to ensure the library is leading innovative, meaningful, and impactful initiatives that meet campus needs and align with strategic priorities. Take it away, Sydney and Ashley.
Thank you, Sophie. So yes, today we're going to talk a little bit about a library well-being collection that we put together this past semester. So to give you all a little bit of background information, in the fall of 2023, the library learned that we had been allocated about $5,000 in grant money from the Dean of Students office. And our guidance for using these funds was that we should use them in some way to support student well-being. So our initial approach was really the sky is the limit, because we had the freedom to explore what would be best for our specific community. And we also are aware, based on some student anecdotal evidence, that the library can be often associated with some high stress situations, think working on a project or a paper into the wee hours of the morning. And as such, we really wanted to provide some different avenues in our space for students to use the library differently than some of these high stress situations. And so Ashley and I held an initial brainstorming meeting with some of our colleagues to discuss how we wanted to spend the funds. In this meeting, we realized that a lot of folks held the perception that student wellness is primarily concerned with students' mental health. And while this is certainly true, we ultimately decided that we really wanted to be able to support student wellness more holistically. And so in the end, we decided to build a wellness collection that supports many facets of student wellness, including financial wellness, healthy exercise and eating habits, and very simply having fun.
So before we get into the actual collections themselves, there were several factors that influenced our final decisions and helped us shape what type of collections to develop. So while we did take inspiration from peer institutions' wellness collections and our own students' interests, we also had to consider our system capabilities. Due to some current limitations around item requests, we decided that all non-monograph items would remain in-house use only for the time being. So it also has the added benefit of removing potential barriers to items, as students wouldn't have to approach a person or an info desk to ask for items that they might possibly feel self-conscious about using. Although we recognize that the in-house model might lead some items to go walking, our College Davidson is really proud of our honor code. So all students participate in a ceremony to sign it when they first arrive on campus. And our library remains open 24/7 for student access, despite being unstaffed in later hours. So the library as a whole already has a history of placing trust in our students. We also had to consider the fact that our library is preparing for a whole building renovation. So our doors are shutting in about a year. And there were a few ideas such as increasing standing desk areas or adding massage chairs that just didn't make sense to invest in large items that we would then potentially just have to sit in storage for 2 years. Finally, we did create a detailed budget proposal in order to maintain accountability to our funders, and then just having to tweak some items in order to fit within that budget caused some things to be cut. So the 3 main areas where we decided to invest funds include a board game collection, a collection of wellness items, and of course, a wellness book collection. Based on feedback that we heard from students, we invested a large portion of funds into a board game collection, and there are actually even more than what's pictured here. Since 95% of Davidson students live on campus, many don't have additional storage spaces for games. Some of the more complex strategic games can also be quite pricey, like upwards of $50 each, which is often outside of the average college student's budget. So for these reasons, we felt that a board game collection might both fill a gap and also encourage students to use the library for fun in the evenings instead of just studying. We used ratings and reviews from the website Board Game Geek and created a collection of a mix of 2-person, multiplayer, casual, and strategic games, hoping to include a little bit of something for everyone. And we also engaged our collection student workers in this area of the project, where they helped extend the life of the collection by creating laminated pieces lists, organizing pieces into containers, and creating QR codes with links to instructional videos. So the games will be cataloged into our system this summer, which will allow users to search for them within the collection. And then games can also be scanned for in-house use, and that will allow us to gather some data around what's being used the most often. So next we have a collection of wellness items. Given that the library is often viewed as an intense study zone, we wanted to provide items to reduce student stress within the library. So either by bringing comfort or by providing brain breaks. With this in mind, we purchase items like weighted lap blankets, fidgets and small puzzles, daylight lamps, under-desk bicycles, Lego tables, wiggle seats, and even a robotic support cat. So we often also provide community puzzles around the library, and students tend to enjoy like shared puzzling in order to take study breaks. So we also greatly expanded our puzzle collection. Since selection of these items were mostly influenced either by viewing other library collections or through input from our library director, who's a former occupational therapist, we're currently working to gather student feedback around which items they'd like to see more of, and we have a reserve of funds so that we can expand those areas. Finally, for our wellness book collection, we created a recommendation profile within our vendor software and then worked together to select titles representative of different backgrounds, cultures, and topics, everything from meditation to financial health. Based on a student survey data from an unrelated project, we already knew that our student body prefers print over ebooks for leisure reading, so we intentionally focused this collection on print formats. We also thought that the removal of screen time might just serve as a side wellness benefit as well. And our library uses a self-checkout machine and app, so hopefully that will help reduce any anxiety around checking out books on sensitive topics.
And so next we're going to talk a little bit about what we've done to promote our well-being collection and how we can plan to continue promoting it in the upcoming academic year. So due to the timing of when we acquired and processed our materials, we decided to adopt both a soft launch and a hard launch approach to outreach and promotion, and I'm going to talk a little bit about both. So late this spring, we soft launched much of the wellness collection, including the books, wellness items, puzzles, and Lego tables, as Ashley discussed. And much of our promotion during this period was more passive, meaning that we focused more on co-locating the materials in high visibility student areas and utilized a lot of point of signage to indicate where these new materials were located for our students. We also planned an initial rollout of items just before and also during final exam week, because we know that this is a stressful time for students. And we knew because of that the items were likely to see some use before students left at the end of the semester. We also wanted to take a little bit of time during this period to assess the materials and ended up evaluating with a combination of anecdotal evidence. So you can see one such example of this on the screen here. We had a student reply to us on social media about how much they liked the puzzles, observed in-house use of these items, so items moving around the space and the frequency with which they were moving, and a brief whiteboard survey during finals week where we asked students to just put a check mark beside their favorite wellness item. And so we plan to use this feedback from students to purchase more of the most popular items that we have with our reserve funds. And during the hard launch phase in 2024, we plan to launch our game reference collection by collaborating with the student-run Games Club to host a gaming party. We waited to do this because students are very busy during finals week. We acknowledge that, and planning and promoting a party just didn't seem something that was feasible for our students at the time. So we're going to wait to do that until the fall. And additionally, we needed a little bit more time over the summer to finish processing some of our materials, as Ashley discussed earlier, getting them cataloged in our system. And so we just needed a little bit of additional time to do that. But another promotional idea we have for the fall is holding a naming contest for our library cat, which is something we're really excited about, our RoboCat. And we also plan to develop some more content for social media in the form of short form promotional videos, because those are what have the greatest reach with our student population. And we also plan to develop more digital signage to have around both the library and the broader campus to increase awareness.
So a few of the things, a few of our takeaways from throughout this process, lean into the fun and silliness of it. I can't stress this one enough. I think sometimes everyone needs an excuse to be a big kid again. And students really seem to enjoy some of the more playful items, like the Lego tables have been by far one of the biggest hits. So many students have commented to me about them. One of my student workers was very skeptical of the robotic cat when it arrived, but within 10 minutes, she was working at the computer with it in her lap purring. So I really think sometimes they just need that push to break out of intense academic mode. We also wanted to mention not to be discouraged by what you can't make happen. We had some great ideas pitched in our initial session that just for logistical reasons didn't make sense, but we still ended up with an amazing collection of items.
We also want to stress to leave some extra time for student assessment and feedback. Because students are really our target audience for this collection, we wanted to be sure to give them an opportunity to provide this kind of feedback so that we have a bit of data to back up additional purchases with our reserve funds. And we also just want to say, don't be afraid to keep promotion simple. As you saw during our presentation, a lot of our promotion thus far has been more passive than active. And so don't worry if you don't have a lot of time to create promotional materials. Sometimes it's just as simple as increasing the visibility of these items. And that's all we have. Thank you all for being here. And here's our contact information if you have additional questions.
Thanks.
Thank you both. That was so awesome. I'm really looking forward to hearing what the students choose for the cat's name. Hopefully we can get into that. But next up we have Hannah, and sorry, here's the title. An Occupational Hazard, Secondary Trauma in Archives by Hannah Nicholson. Perfect, see your slides are up. So Hannah is a recent graduate of the Masters of Library Science program at UNC Chapel Hill. Hannah is originally from the Charlotte area and is particularly interested in studying how memory and gender are reflected in the archives. All right, Hannah, take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah Nicholson. I'm a recent student worker and graduate at UNC Chapel Hill. And today I will be speaking with you about secondary trauma in the archives. So before I go any further, I briefly just wanted to give a content warning about what we'll be speaking with today, just because it is a bit of a heavier subject. I won't be going into detail about traumatic events or content, but I will be speaking about what secondary trauma is and what its symptoms are. So if you feel like it might be difficult for you to hear about these kinds of subjects, please feel free to sit this lightning talk out. So now I'd like to begin by defining what secondary trauma is. So the term secondary trauma is often used interchangeably with a variety of other terms. Cohen and Collins define secondary trauma as personal transformations experienced by trauma workers resulting from a cumulative and empathetic engagement with another's traumatic experiences. What's key in this definition is that the traumatic content takes the form of the information provided and its meaning. So the symptoms of secondary trauma are often very similar to the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. So these can include thinking about the traumatic materials outside of the workplace in dreams or memories, experiencing distressing emotions or sensations, or engaging in unhealthy coping mechanisms. And if these types of symptoms become severe enough, they can result in impairment in day-to-day function. So what does secondary trauma have to do with archivists? So secondary trauma has long been recognized in other fields, such as the medical or psychological fields, because workers in these fields often witness traumatic events or work with people who've experienced trauma. Archivists may not generally witness traumatic events in person, but they can interact with content that documents trauma or with patrons or donors who've experienced trauma. In a study amongst Canadian archivists and other records professionals, Sloan, Vanderfluet, and Douglas found that 72% of the archivists they spoke with had worked with traumatic materials, and many of these respondents reported experiencing symptoms very similar to the ones we just spoke about associated with secondary trauma. So as the study seems to confirm, along with other research, archivists can and do experience secondary trauma. So what is the field at large doing about it? So kind of a greater focus on the personal and emotional aspects of archival work, along with a shift away from a focus on archivists maintaining neutrality, has helped many archivists to feel more comfortable sharing their experiences with secondary trauma in the archives. A lot of these discussions have taken place more informally in blog posts or in-person discussions at conferences. One particularly influential published work is Kirsten Wright and Nicola Lawrence's 2021 article, Safety, Collaboration, and Empowerment, Trauma-Informed Archival Practice. In this article, Wright and Lawrence propose implementing trauma-informed practice to support archivists and patrons experiencing secondary trauma and to limit re-traumatization. Trauma-informed practice is a strengths-based approach that recognizes the effects of trauma on the ways people may interact with organizations or services and is designed to minimize the likelihood of re-traumatization. It's oriented around 5 main principles, which are safety, trust and transparency, choice, collaboration, and empowerment. One important thing to note about trauma-informed practice is it doesn't change the functions or overall mission of an organization. It just changes the way those functions may be provided. Another note is that there is no one right way to implement trauma-informed practice. Every library or archive is different, and so it may implement trauma-informed practice differently to meet its own needs. So Wright and Lawrence in their article list specific strategies linked with each of the 5 principles trauma-informed practice is based upon. Due to time constraints, I'm choosing instead to kind of combine them into the larger strategic approaches they represent. So the first of these, and perhaps the most important, is to destigmatize discussions of secondary trauma and requests for support. If staff members don't feel comfortable talking about secondary trauma or seeking support if they need it, even if support services are offered, they may not feel comfortable taking advantage of them. So it's important to kind of work on making staff members feel more comfortable kind of talking about secondary trauma, and if they feel they need support, making them feel comfortable to seek it out. Another kind of key strategy is to provide training for staff to prepare them for working with traumatic records and responding to secondary trauma. In other fields where employees are known to experience secondary trauma, they're often provided with these types of trainings just to prepare them. And so it similarly may be helpful for archival staff to be given training about the kinds of traumatic materials they may work with, what secondary trauma is, and kind of how to respond and seek support if they do experience it. Another big strategy is to provide staff with choices about how they interact with potentially traumatic materials whenever possible. So these choices could be letting staff choose if they want to work with a colleague when working with traumatic materials, or like designating specific types of traumatic materials they would prefer not to work with. Sometimes, depending on the situation of the organization, it may not be possible to provide more choices in every situation. And in this case, it's important to be very clear and open about why more choices can't be provided. And lastly, Wright and Lawrence suggest adopting a universal assumption of inclusion. And so that just means providing trauma-informed services to every employee, regardless of whether or not it's known if the employee is experiencing secondary trauma. And the idea behind this is that employees should never have to explain or justify their need or desire for support. In Wright and Lawrence article and in Sloan et al. Study, they mentioned some underlying factors to keep in mind when implementing trauma-informed practice. The first of these is that though it's not clear why some people experience secondary trauma and others don't, it is known that a major risk factor is the frequency of exposure to trauma. So if a library or archive often works with traumatic materials, it may be more important than ever to consider implementing trauma-informed practice. Another factor to keep in mind is that it can be difficult to define which records may be traumatic because different employees may react differently to different records. One respondent in Sloan et al. Study put it perfectly when they said, one person's upsetting is often another person's statement of fact. Additionally, secondary trauma can also stem not just from records themselves, but from the absence of records, the way records are described, and interactions with patrons or donors. Another factor to keep in mind is that employees may feel like they aren't entitled to experience secondary trauma. They may feel that it's insulting to individuals in the records who experience trauma in person to then claim that they're experiencing trauma. And so this may influence their willingness to seek support. And lastly, it's important to be thoughtful when providing support services. This came up a lot in Sloan et al. Study. A lot of the respondents mentioned experiencing barriers to accessing support services that could have been avoided if the services had been offered in a more thoughtful manner. For example, one respondent mentioned that their organization offered counseling services, but they weren't comfortable accessing them because the counselor was a coworker that they would work with often on other projects. And so they didn't feel comfortable talking about their experiences with trauma with that person. Perhaps the most common barrier of all that was mentioned was that employees weren't told what the services available were or how to access them. So overall, implementing trauma-informed practice can't prevent trauma reactions from ever taking place, but it can minimize the possibility of causing harm and provide a framework for responding if an employee does experience secondary trauma. Like I mentioned earlier, different organizations may apply the principles of trauma-informed practice in different ways, and that's perfectly acceptable. Since every organization is different, they may need to apply trauma-informed practice differently to meet their own needs. And lastly, kind of the best first step for an organization interested in implementing trauma-informed practice is to shift the culture of their organization towards more acceptance, towards talking about secondary trauma, and more comfort in seeking support. This is important because this step kind of provides a really useful foundation for the other strategies that can then be implemented. And so these are some of the works that I relied on when researching for this presentation. So if you're interested in a more in-depth discussion of secondary trauma, these are some really good places to go. And that's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Hannah. Great job. Thank you for sharing so many of those great articles and research papers for further reading. That's super helpful. So we've got one more lightning talk ready, and this one is going to be supporting NC college student resiliency using LibGuides as an OER by Rachel Pontillo and Christy Drake. So Rachel is an LIS student at East Carolina University with a concentration in public librarianship. She is currently a library assistant with UNCSA. And Christy is also an LIS student at East Carolina University with a concentration in academic librarianship. She is currently a library assistant with UNCSA. So take it away.
Hi, everybody. So today we are just going to do a brief overview of a project that we have been working together on this since January, supporting college student resiliency through creating LibGuides. And it's myself and Christy who have been working on this project, building LibGuides with purchased materials and materials from NC Live.
So this project is built on resiliency, and we like to start with just reading the definition of resiliency. So it's the process and outcome of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experiences, especially through mental, emotional, and behavioral flexibility and adjustment to external and internal demands. So what does that mean for our libraries? It means that we're providing resources that students, faculty, anyone with access to the resources are able to access in any way that they need to. And they do not have to worry about people seeing what they are accessing. So we got the funds through the GEAR grant, and the ebooks that we worked with were purchased by the Efficiencies Working Group.
So we chose to use LibGuides as an open resource platform because it's a common infrastructure at most libraries. The UNC Public University system has all of these libraries have access to them because they're easy to not just create, but to reuse, adapt, and customize for each campus. So while we create the basic LibGuide with the resources that we purchased, libraries are able to add their own resources in their own collection to the LibGuides in addition to the resources that we added on there. And it has a common look and feel for each campus, so it has a little bit of uniformity, a uniform look to it.
And so in the chat, we actually are providing the link to the project so that you can go in and look at it on your own. So as Rachel was saying, we started with that ebook purchase, and it was around 315 ebooks that all of the campuses are going to be able to access. And we're adding a few more within the next month or two before the project officially ends. And we're hoping that it's going to get prepared and ready to go for the fall so that students can use it. And you will see when you go in there and look that you can see the ebooks, but you can also see that it's NC Live materials. So each of the individual LibGuides for the resiliency project, they will have NC Live materials that can be accessed, and some of them have their own page, some of them are within where the ebooks are also listed. And then we also have added in some other open access and open education resources.
So why use materials from NC Live? So all of the ebooks that were purchased are related to different aspects of student resiliency, whether it's just self-care or if it's talking about mental health, specific first generation students. We wanted to be able to provide even more access to resources, identify even more resources for anybody to be able to use for this project. So we used multiple resources from NC Live, including ebooks, including articles and videos and included them in as many as we could in the subguides. So if you click on the website and you go to the master's LibGuide list, all of the ones that are linked under that are subguides that we've created specific topics for, with both the ProQuest materials and NC Live materials. So that is how we added the NC Live materials in there. And they're also, one of the things that we liked about NC Live is it's not just accessible to UNC system students, but everybody, faculty, staff, even community colleges and other students. So that is one reason why we chose NC Live materials.
And so this is what our project center looks like. You can see that on the first page, we're going to have an overview, and that's going to give you some information about the project itself, the background of it, the history of it. And then each of the tabs on the left are going to be where you can find some resources. So we have specifically how to find the resources, because we don't want, if somebody wants to go in and look for something with mental health and they don't necessarily want to go to speak to a librarian, this gives them the chance that they can go in and look at how to find the resources themselves. We also have some wellness resources that are specifically for college students. Our master LibGuide list, which has all the LibGuides that we have created and all the ones that we are going to be creating before the end of the project, and promotional materials so that librarians and other people on campus are able to go in and get our materials and use them on Canvas or Canva to work with, and they can make them the way they want to.
So there were a few challenges we have encountered and may still encounter while we continue to work on this project. The main challenge was every university has a different proxy server. So not all of the students could access at the same through just the same link. So what we've done to try and help with that issue is we have included the electronic ISBN numbers and print ISBN numbers on each of the descriptions, along with the title, call numbers for the Library of Congress call numbers, and even a direct link. And we have also put instructions on how to log on and locate those resources as well. So how to log on to the ProQuest materials and how to find them in their schools databases, and how to find them in the NC Live database. A few other issues we've had come up is that just some technical issues with LibGuides. We had an issue with how to share them, how to make them available community-wide so that other universities could copy them as well. And that librarians at each campus have varying roles, different size university, different funding universities, different roles within the library itself, mental health librarians. So not only have we marketed these LibGuides to librarians at each campus, but we've also reached out to student support faculty and staff as well on each campus in order to share that this is a resources for them, their coworkers and colleagues, and the students, for them to share out with everybody as well.
And as we said, this is an ongoing project. We are going to be continuing to add resources. This is also something that librarians can pull from the LibGuides. They will always be in the LibGuides community, and you can always go in and get the LibGuides and add to them the way you want to as a librarian. And our goal, again, is to have it available for all students in the UNC system libraries by fall 2024. And NC Live has given us so many resources. We are so fortunate that we have NC Live, because we have been able to find so much in terms of scholarly articles, more ebooks and videos that we have been adding to these LibGuides in order to make sure that all students have access to these and have materials that they can use.
And lastly, this is our contact information. As you can see, we put our ECU students' emails on here. You can also go to the Contact Us page on the Project LibGuide. And if you have any direct questions for us or our colleagues on this project, you're welcome to contact us in that way as well.
Awesome.
And
Thank you
that is-
both. Oh, sorry. Yep.
Nope, that's it.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And thank you especially for the link to the LibGuide and for that NC Live shout out. That was really nice to hear. So now we have a few minutes here for Q&A for any of our presenters. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box at the bottom or in the chat, and I'll keep an eye on those. But I did see one come in earlier for Sydney and Ashley. Could you tell us a little bit more about the cat that you have and its purpose?
So it's basically its intended purpose on the box is really more for comforting, I think, elderly dementia patients. But when we were kind of looking and tossing around ideas, Sydney has hosted several live, pet dog, where students can come pet dogs and those types of wellness in-person events. And so, and in my mind, at least, we were, a lot of these students are away from home, they're missing their pets. And so it was kind of a way for us to have a pet available because it is, I wish I had brought it with me. It's a lifelike cat that rolls and purrs and meows and does all sorts of things. And so after the naming contest, we'll have it up at the desk. Students can come borrow it for using while they're studying in the library, and just kind of like have this soft little creature in your lap meowing and purring. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. I see lots of compliments coming in the chat, but if anyone has a question for any of our presentations or any of our presenters, please feel free to ask. Alrighty, well, I'm going to take this as a sign that you all presented extremely clearly and shared your ideas in a way that everyone could understand, which I agree with. I think they were really awesome. But you all have shared your contact information as well as the links to your projects. And so if anyone is interested in those, please check them out. We'll also have a recording of this session posted and the slide information as well, so you can reach out to the presenters. But thank you all so much for attending. And if you are interested in the 2 o'clock sessions, I will put the link to the virtual schedule in the chat as well. There we go. So please join us for one of the 2 o'clock sessions, and we'll see you there. Thank you so much to our presenters.